Welcome to the Content Repurposer podcast, where we explore how authors can use their book's impact and repurpose it into different mediums. So, for today, we have Alicia, and she is the founder and principal strategist of 23 LLC, where she helps brands and agency strategize and execute social media and influencer marketing. It's so nice to have you as a guest.
Thank you so
I
I'm just so excited. So I love your podcast. I'm really excited to be here.
So I was just curious, how did you come up with influencer marketing? Because usually when I think of influencer marketing, I think of lifestyle content. So I was just curious, how did you integrate it with more of that works with like agencies?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. So it's funny, actually, my influencer marketing, believe it or not, started like really like my YouTube blogspot days. This was like in college. YouTube was huge in the beauty sphere, and this was like 16 years ago. And I remember like I created my first business was this like apothecary, and now I think about it, I just laugh. But beauty was huge on YouTube, and I remember I had a list. We didn't even have a term for influencer at that point, but we followed these personalities, and I remember reaching out to them. And I would ship my product, and they would write their review on Blogspot. Like this was the blogging days, and would review it on YouTube. It was hilarious. I'm thinking about it. It's like, yeah, that was influencer marketing. So eventually, fast forward to like 2014, 2015, Twitter was huge. And that was really when it started becoming integrated into like agencies. So I was actually working for a local agency slash magazine in St. Louis. They were like a lifestyle magazine. And I was in a digital team, and we basically did a lot of influencer marketing. And that was like a really new term at that point too. So we did like a lot of Twitter, like activation, Twitter chats. We did like New York Fashion Week. So that was like my really first foray. I was like 25, 26 into like really commercializing influencer marketing. That around that same time Instagram came along was 2015, and that's when we really saw like a takeoff in influencer marketing. That was in addition to like Pinterest and Twitter and Instagram, and then eventually now we all know about TikTok. So I've just been a part of that evolution of influencer marketing.
Yeah, it's crazy because influencer marketing is so new, but it's been around. I just don't think people have coined the term like as of right now. So I was just curious, when it comes to influencer marketing, how do you like go about it for like an agency?
Absolutely. So the first thing I really consider is obviously, I kind of like to break it into three pillars. So the first is the product, right? What are you selling? Like, what is this a viable product in the market? Like, is this tested? Whatever it is, protein shake, shoes, etc. Is this tested, right? And what category you're in? Restaurant? Are restaurant? Are you consumer goods, etc.? Food, consumer packaged goods. So then there's that. And then secondly is like, your digital presence. So it's like, do you have a good social? Because you can't do influencer marketing without a good social strategy or social platform. So is that established? Do you have a website? Do you have good branding? Like what is your overall voice, your positioning? Influencer marketing should come at the, I wouldn't say the very end, but like it should bolster what you're currently doing. Not to say if you're a startup, you can't have influencer marketing, but influencer marketing, especially in 2024, it's a very, very competitive space. Like everything has been done out there. So those are the things to consider. And then we would strategize. I think the days of like, let's just get an influencer, just send them products. They'll do it for free. That's gone. So a lot of these influencers are businesses themselves. So brands, they have to be prepared to come in to know what their creative strategy is, what they're looking for, their tone of voice, their messaging, their positioning, and obviously their product. So all of those things have to be considered before even approaching the influencers and making sure we are even approaching the right influencers. So knowing, who their target audience is, who are following them, because we're in an age right now partnering with one influencer that could go wrong could destroy your brand. So that's just the landscape. So, being very mindful, very intentional, and knowing this key strategy before pursuing the influencers.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely like now it's becoming more competitive and more like it, and therefore it can become more saturated. But when you said like brands, I think a lot of people have the idea of like, oh, a brand is very important. but I think a lot of people may not know necessarily what that entails. So I know maybe it's a very simple term of brands, but I just wanted to know, like, from your perspective, what do you define as a brand and how can someone use it to their advantage?
Absolutely. I think that's a really great question. So I think of a brand, and that's actually a really good question because I think a lot of founders, when they found a company or they have a business, they think they are the brand. And a lot of times it is true, they are the brand, but a brand should be a separate entity of you. So like think of them as an organic matter, like they have their own tone of voice. What do they stand, their values, their core values, the unique selling, the USP, the unique selling positioning, like what are they selling, right? And like what is your manifesto as a company? So if you have to describe this brand, it's almost like describing this person, and it should be away from the founder itself. Is it sustainable? Is it its own entity? So I think that's a brand. Anything can be a brand, whether you're selling notebooks or if you're selling, even if you're an author, right? You are the brand, and then there is the book that is the brand. So I think really, I think a lot of times where the strategy does fall short is that I think sometimes we kind of misinterpret what the brand is, and when we don't have the core values and the core positioning and we don't have all that set up, I think that's when it becomes a problem because then it's just going to cascade into a slew of other problems when the influencers are trying to promote like what is your messaging.
When people are wanting to market, it's like you start with the target audience. Like, what do your audience want? I think it's similar with branding, where if
Mhm.
you don't clearly understand who your audience is, it trickles down in every single avenue of your marketing and product or services you offer. And it's just going to confuse the audience or anyone who looks at it. They're just going to come off more confused.
Absolutely. I was on, I think I was on Threads the other day, and I actually really love Threads. That's a kind of an underrated like social media platform now. I really love it. But someone talked about, I follow a few marketing people online there, and someone said, like, and I think a lot of people do this when you're in that decision-making table, is like they think they are the target audience. If you are to like you can't be the target audience of everything. And so I think being able to, when we are approaching marketing or creating a strategy, being able to think objectively, I think that's huge because I've marketed almost at this point, almost nearly in my decade experience, about 100, I work with 100 brands, and I am not the target audience for every single one of these. So I do think sometimes, we get onto this decision making table or like, well, I'm not going to buy this. I don't think this font, like kind of take a step back. Like, first, ask yourself, are you really the target audience? And then work from there. Because if you're not, then you can start talking to people who is the target audience. And that I think is the best form of marketing, is that being able to really connect to the potential buyers and not necessarily you.
Yeah. So I was just curious because, like, when you talked about your audience, I was really, I know that it's also emphasized, like I also emphasize like knowing your target audience, but if someone isn't the sole customer, like how would they go about figuring out who their audience is? What are simple things that they can do just to figure out what do their audience want?
I think honestly, it's such an underrated tactic. Like honestly, a survey. So, I think surveys are people think of surveys, they think it's boring, but I think it's very valuable to understand your current existing customer and then expanding it from there instead of guessing, So I think a couple things is that, I think ongoing survey and ongoing marketing with your current existing audience, and, talk to them about it and see like, what do they like? What do they not like? And on it, and obviously, your data analytics as well. I think a lot of brands, that's the last thing people think about, it's like data analytics, but that's where you really see a lot of, information. Like you may think like, oh, women in their mid 40s to 60s are my target audience. But if you really look closely, it may not be. I mean, Stanley Cup was like the perfect example. I mean, they marketed for 100 years, I believe, to men, like construction men. That's like they believe that's their target audience. And they've always been consistent in their sales. But what really blew them into this new era was women. and teenagers.
Mhm.
And they started creating all these colors. So, I think, that's like a really prime example of understanding they thought they have this audience, but if we really look into and really pay attention to who is buying and the potential of it, that you could unlock, the mystery to a gold mine, basically.
Yeah, that's actually really important because when it comes to survey, I think a lot of people are kind of maybe averse to understanding because it does take time, but I think it is worth it because you'll definitely understand things that you probably would have never considered. And so it's just like thinking of like research or being able to research and figure out different opportunities for yourself. I just presented the idea over and over in different groups and see how people react. That could also be research where you just see how people react and then start rephrasing certain things and test how certain phrases, keywords, do people actually want what you like are selling? Or it's just not a great market fit.
I mean, I think it's a combination of research and being intuitive. I think that's the I'm not going to say that's the official formula, but I think that is the formula. It's like, obviously, as your corporation gets bigger, you obviously have more strategic methods and you hire like actual agencies to help you run all these research and stuff like that. But I think a combination of research and intuition and like testing, that's your formula right there. And that's how you're going to create and build a sustainable business. So for example, even me, I had two previous agencies that I co-founded before, and I always felt there was something, a link missing, like a link missing that I'm not understanding. I felt like we weren't really getting the target audience. I wasn't really connecting with my target audience. So when I decided to create my own agency, I was just like, on my own firm, I was like, I need to do this a little differently. How, like, I started visualizing who are the people I want to work with, and then I started kind of reverse engineering, my marketing, and then I realized that most people would market them agents, like, oh, I'm either in hospitality, or I just do doctors, or I do healthcare. I was like, well, I'm going to target audience brands and agency and then solopreneurs, and had two different offerings for both of them. And that has really set a really sustainable revenue for my business that that makes me happy, and that I get to work on meaningful work. So I think, that's just a small example of really understanding my target audience and being able to offer what they need.
Yeah, because I think it's also like what when you said solopreneur agency, it's different because the way that they run their business is very different. A solopreneur, they're doing everything
Yeah.
once, so they need something maybe more simplified so then they can execute it more effectively. Whereas
Mhm.
agency, they probably just need someone else to do it for them. They're probably focused on other tasks. So
Mhm.
being able to meet people where they're at the time that they're at, it's just going to be a better like service or product to sell to them as well.
100%, because that was the missing link in my previous agencies. We would get these clients, but a lot of them were solopreneurs, and it was a constant miscommunication. And then they get upset, or oh, you're too expensive. In reality, we weren't really that expensive, and so there was this consistent mismatch of expectations. And so when I started mine, I was like, I wanted to relieve that stress. And I'm like, and where does it start? And I realized it started with really understanding my target audience and what they really needed. And so I can market it effectively of the exact services that they need. So, and that's just, obviously a B2B service, but same thing with, whether you're selling tea or you're selling coffee or you're selling notebooks or you're selling mugs or books. I think the principle still remains the same.
Yeah, so I also know that you also focus on integrated marketing. So I
Mhm.
was just curious because I don't think I've ever heard the term of integrated marketing. So just let me know like what exact integrated marketing.
Awesome. So it's funny because in my time, back in my school time, integrated marketing was more like how you integrate, offline channels and online channels, how that integrates with your entire marketing campaign. I do think it has kind of changed a little bit. In my definition of integrated marketing, it's more on the digital side. So, like, where I really integrate social influencer marketing and performance marketing. And when I say performance marketing, it's basically paid ads, and how all those three basically coexist together, and how that create a more robust digital marketing campaign. Obviously, I know life is beyond digital. There are people that are doing radio and brochures and offline channels. So if you want to talk about real integrated, back in the day, traditionally, I would say that's the traditional integrated marketing. In my sphere, I do believe I like to combine influencer marketing, social, and paid performance, because I really don't think one is better than the other. I think a lot of times people are like, oh, I'm just doing influence marketing, that's all it works. Or I'm just doing social, that's all it works. And that's great. There are some people who just build such a persona online that the moment they put one post out and then they sell out, right? And then there are some brands that maybe that doesn't work, but for some reason, influencer marketing is all that works for them. And then there's some brands that don't even do influencer marketing or social, they just do performance marketing, which I don't really recommend. So ideally, I like to create all three. So for example, like, maybe you have a campaign and you have an influencer that talked about this campaign, right? So why don't we take that, put money behind it, promote that strategically, and and then infuse that with your content strategy for the month or whatever campaign you're working on. So I kind of approach it from that perspective.
So I think it's like sometimes, especially like with social media, I think it's just kind of expected that everyone should have to do it, or
Yeah,
it's just like the pressure. Well, at least I've noticed because I've also worked in social media, but I think it's also important to have like other ways of marketing as well. So you have at least more data, but you also know where your audience is at, and then it could also enhance you having social media and then also having paid ads can enhance because they need somewhere to go to. So it's only going to benefit them long term.
absolutely. I kind of always break it down to cold audience and warm audience. And like, I think, and that influencer marketing is it's kind of, so social is like where you're kind of promoting to full audience, right? Like that's your warm audience, people who followed you. And then you have the performance marketing where you're trying to target people who don't know you, right? So cold audience. And influencer marketing is kind of in the middle. Like you may have, kind of like you may, if you're working with a certain influencer, more than likely their followers are, somewhat would match your brand. So it's kind of in between. So, my thought is, we kind of do a warm, lukewarm, cold audience, and that hopefully ties in together and help boost your digital presence.
Like when it comes to the people that you work with, how would you like break down a service? Do you have like an example, a current client or person that you've worked with in the past and you were able to create like an integrative marketing strategy as well as like creating them like created a like influencer marketing strategy as well?
Yeah, I had one author that I worked with a year ago on, and it was a really fun. Actually, I do need to have two authors actually I've worked with where we kind of really did integrated marketing, and we really first like ran their social and make sure it looks pristine, it looks great, and then we started integrating that with influencer marketing to really help bolster kind of like their social equity, right? People talking about it, and obviously we peppered in with other people who who have read their books, and then third part, then I started running ads for them behind that, and including on Amazon as well. So we kind of hit all these channels, and it really, I mean, like it worked. Like, specifically like one author, you guys would probably know that. I'm not sure if I can share due to NDAs and stuff like that. But I mean, like he was consistently every time I would do the ads and do social, he would consistently sell about 20,000 books each week. My other author, obviously, he doesn't have the brand recognition or name recognition as the other guy, but he would consistently sell to me. There were sales going through every week. So those were really good examples of like, hey, when you have an integrated plan that everything matches from a website to a really good website to really good positioning to obviously they have really good books. The books are great. I don't think it would work if the books weren't good topics either. So those are really, I think, a great example of how you can really integrate influencer marketing, performance marketing, and social together.
Yeah, that's actually really helpful because I think people only think of the book itself and they don't realize like all the other parts that go along with it. And I know that a lot of authors, when they publish the book, they're so focused on writing. All those
Mhm.
things can be overwhelming. So when it comes to marketing the book, they're just like it's like another realm where it's just even
Absolutely.
it's like another like skill that they have to learn. And I think this way where you're able to piece put all of these things together will help elevate the book itself.
Absolutely. And not just books, like brands or whatever you're working on, is that, I always tell people, like, marketing is multifaceted. There's no one way. And I think sometimes, it's hard if someone has a black and white thinking. It's like they just want one thing, and I want one thing and that works. Why can't we just do paid performance and that works and that gives me? Because just like a human being, nobody is just one, like single facet. Everyone's multifaceted, as a person. So same thing with marketing, there's multifaceted. I like to call it multifaceted marketing. Is like, we have to touch base on every single portion, and those that succeed 100%, they have a multifaceted marketing strategy. It's very rarely, I mean, unless you're Beyonce, where in a single touch, you sell out. Most people are not Beyonce or Taylor Swift, and those are like 0.00001%. But for the rest of us common folks, is that, we really have to think of multiple channels, and how we can lean into one a little bit more, maybe social, maybe a little bit stronger than, say, print ad. But social may not work for every other brand. If your brand is mostly like a legacy brand and you tend to, target people who are 60 and up, print maybe your target, your channel. So really, I always tell clients, lean in and listen, and just listen and observe, because I think that's your best, and do research, and that's your best strategy.
Yeah, it's really important. I think it feels like it's often overlooked, but I think if you just spend a little bit more time and be more intentional who your audience is, how you present to them, like if you could see yourself in their shoes
Mm-hmm.
and see how you are perceived based on like your digital presence, your messaging, your brand, and how everything, all of it combines together,
Mm-hmm.
you'll just go a lot further.
Absolutely. I mean, I was there too. I've been in business for over a decade right now. In my early, I'm like, yeah, I had no target. Everyone's my target audience. I'll do everything and anything. And, I think that's a very common evolution of business when you first start, right? You kind of, it's like a baby learning how to walk. Like, you're trying to figure out, do I walk? Do I run? Do I hop? And then, but now it's like, now that I know my target audience, I have turned down clients that weren't a good. And I think obviously that's the product of just experience and like the number of people you work with, but you want it to be successful. So, I think even whether you're a brand, whatever you're selling, I think really not everyone is going to be your target audience, and that's okay. The world is massive. And like, there is no way, unless, even Coca-Cola is not, you think that something like, a massive brand like that would be, everyone would be target audience. It's not. Like, there are people who just don't drink Coke and don't drink, maybe they're a healthy lifestyle influencer or whatever it is. So I think if people can be okay with learning that they're not everyone's cup of tea, then I think once they kind of get over that mindset, then we can start really, really honing in who's your target audience, what's the demographic. Another thing, people would always say, like, I want to target, the top 10% income. I mean, who doesn't? Like, who doesn't want to, target the top 10%? But I think, if we can dive in a little deeper of like their demographic, their shopping habit, beyond just like their income level, or beyond just like, saying that it's everyone, I think brands will be more successful. And because then it's more about the average lifetime value of the customer than just that particular moment of them buying your product. I try to like explain that to clients.
I was just curious, like, do you have any offers or anything you want to share with the audience?
I actually did just launch my VIP day collections on social. That's great for like solopreneurs. These are my strategy days. So basically, I help come in. I help come in and really strategize a work. I call them VIP days, and the goal is at the end of it that you have the clarity you need, whether it's content strategy or whether it's brand strategy, whether it's social media strategy. You can really take that and then run with it. And so, yeah, I had that just launch, and I'm really excited to actually. It's funny because when you work in marketing, you don't really market your product because you're so busy marketing other people's products. But yes, it's VIP Day collection on my website.
Thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast.
Thanks for having me. This was really fun, and I love what you're doing. So thank you for having me.